Welcome back to new session. This is your trainer, mentor and PMP coach Anand. This is continuation of scope management knowledge area, and in this session we will focus on defined scope process. The learning objective of this session are: we will start with a process overview, we'll go through defined scope process definition, we'll also talk about how scope can lead to a successful project. We'll go through input tool techniques and outputs, what is product analysis, what is value engineering and value analysis, what is a project scope statement and what it contains, and finally quick review. Before getting into details, let's do a quick review of all the processes inside scope management knowledge area. So first process is plan scope management, part of a planning process group. Next, collect requirement. This is where all the requirements will be collected, again part of planning. Next is a defined scope. This is where the project scope statement will be created, and this is the process that we are learning in this session. Next is create work breakdown structure. This is where the scope baseline will be finalized, again part of a planning. So first four processes are a part of a planning process group. And then you have validate scope, which is business acceptance process, and control scope. This is where we will try to ensure whatever scope is defined, that is what is delivered, nothing less, nothing more. So last two processes are part of monitoring and controlling process group. In the previous process, that is collect requirements, we collected, analyzed, prioritized and finalized requirement that will go into the product or service that project is going to create. Requirements includes business requirement, stakeholder requirement, solution requirement, transition requirement, project requirement, quality requirement, and so many different types of requirement depends upon in which industry you are executing the project. Defined scope process take the final requirement and develop a detailed description of both the product and the project that will create it. It helps you to create the boundaries of a project and product by documenting what is included and what is excluded in the final deliverables. It also defines the acceptance criteria which are useful for business acceptance. All this information will be detailed inside project scope statement, which is the output of this process. It is an iterative process. In large project, scope will be finalized for each phase of the project. In Agile, scope will be finalized for each sprint or iteration during the sprint planning meetings. Take a look at definition of defined scope process. Defined scope process is a process of developing a detailed description of the project and product, which result in the form of project scope statement. It describes project service or result boundaries by defining which of the requirement collected will be included and excluded. As you know, if a scope is not properly defined, it is very difficult to measure the success of the project. Well-defined scope can lead to a project success as it helps in defining a detailed and unambiguous scope, ensures all assumptions and constraints are analyzed and agreed with all stakeholders. It helps improve the accuracy of cost, time and resource estimates, and it helps in future for detailed resource assignments. Let's take a look at input, tools and techniques, and outputs. Inputs are project charter, project management plan, project documents, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. Project charter. Project charter is the first place to go for finding out about the scope of the project. As you know, project charter is first document which authorizes a project manager to execute the project. It provides project objectives, list of product requirements or characteristics, high-level project description, as well as the approval requirement. Project management plan. Scope management plan, which is subsidiary plan of project management plan, will have documented details about how to do all the scope management processes, including define scope process. It will provide framework to define the project scope. The key project document that can be used to define scope are requirements document. This is a key input to define scope. This is where you find requirements that will be part of a product and project scope, and some of them will get excluded. The requirements documentation may take a form of requirement traceability matrix. Assumption log. The assumption log contains high-level assumptions and constraints about the project, product, stakeholders, and the factors that may influence the scope. Change in any assumptions may change the product and/or project scope. Risk register. Certain risks that can be mitigated through reducing or changing the project or product scope or by outsourcing work to external vendors. This risk will have impact on defining scope. Enterprise environmental factors may play important role in defined scope process. Organizational structure, organizational culture, marketplace conditions. For example, is there any vendor working on a similar product or project? Personal administration. For example, in government project, HR law may constrain hiring certain resources. OPA, organizational process asset that can influence defined scope process are applicable policies, procedures, and templates for a project scope statement based upon the scope management plan, project files from past project, for example, requirement traceability matrix of a similar project which is successfully completed in past can be very useful. Lesson learned from previous phases or projects will ensure your project team don't repeat the past mistake. Tools and techniques. Expert judgment, data analysis, decision making, interpersonal and team skill. These 4 tools and techniques are very generic. We have seen them multiple times and they are used in many decision making processes on the project. The 5th technique is product analysis, which is used specially for this process. Expert judgment. The expert with similar experience in the project can help define scope. They can help in defining project boundaries. Data analysis. Alternative analysis is a data analysis technique used to evaluate various options to meet the requirements and project objectives. Decision making. Multi-criteria decision analysis provides a systematic analytical approach using decision matrix. In particular, the constraints such as schedule, budget, and resources are used to rank the various alternative ways to meet the requirement. Interpersonal and team skills. Interpersonal skills are important for facilitation of workshops. Through facilitation, you can develop common understanding of the project deliverables, and project or product boundaries with a cross-functional team can be easily defined. Boundaries refer to inclusion and exclusion of the requirement. Workshop includes joint application development, JAD sessions, quality function deployment, QFD, mostly used in engineering, for example in manufacturing sector, and user stories, mostly used in agile project like in software development. We talked about these 3 techniques in previous process, that was collect requirements. Product analysis. It can be an effective tool to evaluate product, especially when product is output of the project. It helps improve the project team's understanding of the product. This is done by asking questions and forming answers regarding the product's use, characteristics, and other aspects like security, quality, safety, etc. There are various techniques which will be used based upon the industry in which you are executing the project. Techniques are product breakdown, system analysis, requirement analysis, system engineering, value engineering, and value analysis. Let's understand each technique in detail. Product breakdown. The requirements are decomposed into level of detail needed to design the final product. It looks like a work breakdown structure. The conceptually it is same, it is a decomposition, but the purpose is to design the final product by balancing all components of the product. Requirement analysis. Requirements are defined to a level of detail which is sufficient for system design. Requirements should be actionable, measurable, testable, traceable, and acceptable to all stakeholders. System analysis. It relates closely to requirements analysis. It is the process of studying a business in order to identify its goal and purpose and create systems and procedures to match that. System engineering. It ensures that the product satisfies customer needs, cost requirement, and quality demand. It is the process of balancing constraints like cost, quality, scope to get the best possible product. Value engineering and value analysis are important. You can expect one question on this. So let's understand them one by one. Value engineering. Value engineering is a systematic method for analyzing a design, product, process to improve the performance and quality while reducing the associated cost. The aim is to achieve the lowest lifecycle cost by considering alternative designs. It helps optimize the overall value of the project from inception to operations. For example, you can build a product with less cost by using substandard components. Product may have everything as required, but life of the product may be short, or product may need frequent maintenance, resulting in higher cost of ownership. Value analysis. It is a cost reduction tool that considers whether the function is really necessary or not. For example, if you are building a budget phone, do you need a 10 megapixel camera? Answer is no. So, developing a function at lowest cost without degrading performance or quality, which is also referred as a cost of quality. So, overall, value analysis helps finding the least expensive way to deliver scope without compromising on performance or quality. The outputs of defined scope process are project scope statement and project document updates. Project scope statement. It is the description of project scope, major deliverables, assumptions, and constraints. Product scope description is a narrative description of characteristics of a product, service, or result of the project. Deliverables are the building blocks of the project. When each deliverable is completed, they create the final deliverable. Acceptance criteria are the set of conditions that are required to be met before deliverables are accepted by business. Inclusion, exclusions. Inclusion, we all understand, so requirements which are included as a part of project scope statement. Exclusion, explicitly stating what is not going to be in the project scope. It helps prevent unnecessary changes. Whenever some stakeholder decide to try to add that particular scope during the course of project, you can always point to this exclusion which was earlier approved or agreed with the business stakeholder. Constraints and assumptions. This will be identified and documented. So of course there is assumption log which will get updated with these assumptions. So as shown in the image, list of deliverables and requirement which comes from the requirement document will be further elaborated and explicitly mention whether those requirements are included or excluded from the project scope. Please note that some elements of the project charter look similar to project scope statement. So a lot of time students get confused. But understand those elements which are similar are at higher or general level in the project charter. For example, project purpose or justification inside project charter is at very high level. Now, similar information will be elaborated inside a project scope statement in the form of project scope description. Again, in project charter, you might have objectives and success criteria. Now, this will be clearly decomposed yet detailed inside acceptance criteria, which is a part of a project scope statement. Project document updates. So some of the project documents which will get updated as outcome of defined scope process are assumption log. When requirements are turned into deliverable, this may lead to identification of additional assumptions or constraints that were not previously apparent, maybe during your project charter or business case. So all these assumptions will be logged into assumption log. Requirements documentation. Requirement review and product analysis may result in adding requirement or changing requirement. These changes or additions are added to the requirements documentation, including requirement traceability matrix. Stakeholder register. New stakeholder may be identified during their participation in this process, especially during requirements workshop. So all these stakeholders will be a part of your stakeholder register. Great work. You had completed another process, that is defined scope. Let's do a quick review. We started with the process overview. We tried to understand what exactly mean by defined scope. Then we gone into the scope process definition. We talked about how clear and concise scope can lead to a successful project. Then we talked about input, tool, techniques and output, and some of the key tools and techniques like product analysis, value engineering, value analysis, and finally we talked about project scope document and the content of those documents. Thank you.